You're listening to the Money Monopolizers Podcast, helping you take control of your financial destiny. It's about time that we invest more in our financial literacy and work towards building generational wealth. If you think you're ready to do the same, then you've come to the right place. Alex, Marlon, y'all ready? Let's get this bread.
What's good, everybody? It's Alex Camullo here, and we are back with episode 7 of the Money Monopolizers Podcast, and I'm here with my co-host, Marlon Walls. Marlon, how you doing today, bro?
Doing really good, man. I'm excited for this episode. I think this is going to be a really good one, talking about credit and how to improve it. So I'm hoping that we have a really good one today and you're able to get back to the community. How about you?
I'm doing good, bro. Yeah, we got a good episode coming today. So far, we are 6 episodes in, and it's been we've been getting a lot of good feedback. As always, continue to keep giving us that feedback and letting us know what we could be, talking about. Anything you want to hear, anything topics you want to hear on the show, just let us know, hit us up, and just make those suggestions. But other than that, it's going good, bro. We closing on that flip this week, so I'm excited about that. We should be making a good amount of money on that. It's been a 4-month turnaround, just about. So not a bad return on our time. I'll say, based off the money we're going to get off of that. So we'll be talking about that sometime in the future. But yeah, so today, let's get on with this episode, though. Today, we're talking about the importance of good credit and how to build and also improve your credit, right? So credit is it's a daily part of your life, right? Everything, for the most part, most of the big financial decisions that you're going to make in your life are going to involve credit. So it's really important to, number one, have good credit and understand how to get good credit. So that's kind of what we want to talk about today. And, we're going to go through that in pretty good detail here. But first, just starting off, I want to kind of talk about why having good credit is so important. So, I just mentioned, it's something that you're going to, a lot of the financial decisions that you're going to make in your life are going to involve using credit, because the thing about it is a lot of times credit just essentially, as we talked about it last week, good debt versus bad debt, but it's essentially just allowing you to use other people's money, right? So other people are entrusting you to use their money, and that you're going to pay it back on the timeline that y'all agreed on. So it's self-explanatory why that's important. But talking about good debt and bad debt, like I just mentioned, we were talking about last week. I think mortgages and really any type of investments and those kind of things, you need to have good credit and be able to justify that you are someone that is paying people back. Marlon, you want to comment on that?
Yeah. I do want to, I think this is a very important topic. So I do want to just give my own little personal insight on how I've been able to use credit, especially when getting to my first investment. So I'm going to save a story for the very end. So just make sure anybody who leaves usually early in these podcasts, be sure to stick around this time, because I'm going to give my little take on how I was able to boost my credit by over 100 points within probably just a day. So just stick around. Make sure you listen in for that later on. This is a very important topic.
And he's not a guru. He's not not giving you a guru scheme at the end. It's legit info. So stick around. If you leaving in the middle, I know who you are. Don't even worry about it. No, I'm playing. I don't know who leaving, but I know a lot of people not watching all the way, but that's cool. I mean, look, we putting the info out there for you. If you want it, you take it. If you don't, that's cool too. I ain't tripping either way.
It's free game, bro. Don't forget that. This is free game. It's all you got to do is stick around. So yeah, it's all up to you on how financially successful you want to be in life. So
free game. Like, look, they ain't charging you nothing. Good. Nah. So let's get on. So with this episode, so in order to improve your credit, I think the most fundamental thing about that is, number one, understanding how credit works and understanding what credit is, and from a sense of like how it's determined. So the most important component of your credit is your credit report. So your credit report is essentially just a detailed history of your credit that covers all your open and your closed accounts, any loans. These are like revolving loans or installment loans. Revolving loans are like credit cards, and installment loans are like mortgages and student loans. So it also includes payment history, age of your account, any unpaid debts you have. And just to comment on any unpaid debts go as far as like anything from like you missing mortgage payments or any sort of utility bills down to a library fine. Like if the library wanted to report it to the credit bureau that you didn't pay a $4 library fine, they could do that and it could go as a ding on your record. So just be cognizant of that when you are deciding not to pay your debts. And then also any credit loans or applications you do take on. So all that is essentially compiled in your credit report. And this is all then reported by the three major credit bureaus. So the three major credit bureaus are TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax. If you've never heard of them, get familiar with them. You're going to be hearing them a lot, especially if you just get into the real world. They're going to become your best friends. You want them to be your best friends. So just get familiar with those names: TransUnion, Experian, and Equifax. So these are the credit agencies that report your credit. So all the lenders and any creditors, they can choose to report any information that they want to them. So some lenders and creditors report to all three. Some don't report to all three. So sometimes you might see like different stuff on the credit report depending on who you get it from. If you get it from Experian or TransUnion or Equifax. So just be aware of that. And whenever you are looking at your credit report, and we'll get into kind of how to look at that. So going back a little bit in, little history lesson. Whenever credit like became a thing, well, I would say whenever it became like credit cards became, more practical to use, and like to the 60s and to the 70s, the credit bureaus, the Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, they weren't named that back then, but it was still the same company. But they were essentially just, whenever they needed to give out a credit report, they would have to, kind of compare the reports between each other and kind of try to systemize, get one common report to give to a creditor or someone that's trying to review your credit. So you can imagine just how like tedious and inefficient this system was for them trying to get credit reports to people, right? So now at this time in like the late 80s, they said, okay, we need to come up with a way to standardize and create an impartial scoring system for people to be able to get their credit and have it be uniform across the board, and just say, hey, this is like a reliable, effective, trustworthy way to say this is this person's credit rating. So in 1989, the bureaus had worked with a tech company called Fair Isaac and Company. So Fair Isaac and Company is now known as FICO. So that's where the FICO comes from. Fair Isaac and Co. So FICO. So that was a tech company that essentially they worked with the credit bureaus to develop an algorithm that takes the data from the credit reports that they compiled, and it would give you a score. So this score became what is now known as the FICO score. So this is the industry standard credit score that is used across all industries by probably about 90% of creditors and lenders use this as like a gauge of how, trustworthy you are when it comes to credit. And there's multiple actually credit scoring systems. There's, I think, 4 other ones that are used, but the FICO score is by far the most common one used, and it's the one you need to worry about the most. You don't really even need to know what the other ones are, but this is the most important one to know. So let's kind of get into, that's going to be the bulk of this episode, getting into the FICO score and what that is. So yeah, the FICO score, like I said, is just your credit score essentially. This just pretty much, it assesses your credit risk or your credit worthiness, in quotes, or your likelihood to pay debts, right? So it's just a way for creditors to gauge how trustworthy you are as someone to give you debt to, right? So
So basically, simply put, is just think of a credit score or your FICO score as a number that's tells a credit bureau how good you are at handling debt, or a credit lender how good you are at handling debt.
So yeah, this comes from the three credit bureaus, and the FICO algorithm, it's compiling the data from the three credit bureaus that makes your score. So the score ranges from 300 on the low end to an 850. So you heard people saying, I got an 850 credit score, or you got a 800 credit score, or 500 credit score. That's what they're talking about. They're talking about their FICO score. So on the low end, they're kind of put into different levels and different categories of, how good or bad they are. So on the low end, you have your very poor range, which is from 300 to 579. Then you have the fair, which is 580 to 669. You have your good, which is 670 to 739. Very good, which is 740 to 799, and your exceptional, which is 800 to 850. So if you're getting 800 to 850, you sitting pretty. You in that gold star status. So the credit score, this FICO score, it pretty much is going to determine a lot of stuff for you moving forward, right? So it's going to determine, the number one thing it's going to determine for you is the interest rates that you're going to get on any type of loans. So you got to think of it from a lender perspective. If the lender was going to give you a loan, they're going to look at your FICO score, and if it's low, they're going to say, whoa, you don't look like someone that's trustworthy with credit. You have a 425 credit score. That's, I don't know, we're going to have to give you a 15% interest rate just in case you default, so that will be covered. So now they're getting more money out of you, so that if you do default, it's fine. They charge you 15% interest along the way. So they're going to be getting more money out of you, right? So that's the biggest thing it's going to determine for you. And then it's also going to determine stuff like the insurance rates you're going to get. So insurance companies, honestly, I don't know why they use that to determine your rate. It should be more based off of your driving, but that's just the way it goes. So I've even seen it for some like apartment leases and that kind of stuff. People using credits, like people, land or property managers needing to see your credit. I know I do it for my tenants. Hey, I got to see your credit before I let you, get on a lease here, because I need to know that they're going to be trustworthy people that are going to have at least a history of paying their debts. So it's definitely a big thing whenever you're trying to get a house, and also like other small stuff like cell phone plans. So just be cognizant of that. It's affecting a lot of stuff that you may not even be aware of. So just know that it's always someone watching how you are using credit.
I can't express to y'all the importance of credit though, because the better credit you have, the better loan opportunities you're going to get ultimately. So like he was talking about cars, landlords, cell phones, everybody's going to be checking your credit, because if they're going to lend you something out, they want to know, are you going to be able to return them that money? So that's why credit is so important, because it's something that's always tied to your name. So as soon as you walk up as Alex Camilio, Marlon Walls, they're going to check. They're going to use your credit to say how likely are you to pay them back. So if they loan you some money, how likely are you going to be to pay them for it or whatever. So if they loan you a phone that's worth $1,000, and they say they're going to put you on a payment plan. If you are not, if your credit says that you're not responsible, you're going to get a super high interest rate for them to be able to protect themselves on their end, because they can't trust you to pay them back. They want to just charge you more upfront. So even if you stop making your payments later on, at least they did recoup some of the money that they might lose out on as a result.
Yeah. I was going to say, and why should they trust you? They shouldn't. You got bad credit. They shouldn't. And I understand there's like circumstances that kind of things happen that force people's hands, like medical bills and that kind of stuff. But for the most part, you got to gauge it somehow. I don't blame them, honestly, because I know for me personally, shoot, I wish I would have looked at some people's credit before I gave them money, because I'm sitting here now without that money back. I ain't got the money back.
That's a little bit of an insider. I know who you're talking about. So.
Exactly. Same thing to you too.
I know. I promise you, I know that for firsthand how it is when you lend somebody some money and they don't give it back to you.
Like,
so it's dire that you are able to have some way of gauging who you are lending to. So imagine a complete stranger coming up to you saying, "Hey, can you give me this phone? And can you give me this phone and I'll pay you back?" How are you going to know that they're trustworthy? This is what people are dealing with all the time. So people who sell you cars, it's just like that's exactly what they're going through. Us as landlords, we don't know these people. So what is the best way to gauge how trustworthy they are besides credit? So that's why I'm just saying it's so important to make sure your credit is good to represent you well. Yeah, definitely. And I just want to make another point. This is also very good with investing. So when we go to purchase different investment properties, because we're in real estate, we have to get pre-approved. And understand what pre-approved means, that they're going to do a background check on us. They're going to look at our credit. They're going to see how trustworthy we are for them to loan us money. It's the same exact thing. The principle applies in multiple areas than just one, like the car loans or phones. So it's very important to have your credit looking right. So work on building it and maintaining it. That's two key points that we're trying to portray to you for this episode.
Big facts. Because I mean, even if you don't want to invest, it don't matter. This is something that you got to take serious. So credit is very important. And look, like I said, I said it last week too, but if you listen to someone like Dave Ramsey, he'll tell you like, don't even worry about your credit or something like that, because he's saying you shouldn't even be, trying to use credit to buy stuff. But don't listen to that. That's not. Look, you go and use credit in your life, it's gonna happen. It's credit is not a bad thing. Get the stigma out your head that it's a bad thing. Seriously, it's not a bad thing if it's used responsibly. It's amazing. Yeah. If you don't believe it, go listen to episode 6, and we talked about it a lot in there. So, in order to improve your credit and build your credit, you have to understand like how this score is comprised and how it's determined and what it's made up of. It's like I said, it's an algorithm, which is just essentially just an equation that they created to take multiple factors into account, and they weigh them on different percentages. And that is essentially it's just a mathematical equation. If you can learn how the equation works, you can manipulate it to improve it and also build it. So now we want to kind of give you the information and tell you how it works, how this, thing is comprised, and how this algorithm works in order to create this credit score that you're making. So the most important aspect of your credit score, and we're going to give you the percentages with all of these. So this is 35% of your credit score, your payment history. So your payment history it makes up 35% of your credit score. So when I say payment history, I'm essentially just saying like how you have used credit in the past, right? So the FICO, they look at credit as, oh, your past behavior is indicative of your future behavior, or your past long-term behavior is indicative of your future long-term behavior. So however you acted in the past that's a good gauge on how you're going to act in the future. So we'll use that as the biggest factor when coming up with your score. So this is just pretty much, payment history is just the presence or lack thereof payments. So if you have made payments in the past, you're going to have credit. You're going to have credit to go on. If you haven't, you're not going to have any credit to go off of, because you don't have any. You have never used it. So this is the most important factor. So how something to know with this, and a question to ask yourself is, how often are you missing payments? If you're missing payments frequently, you're going to have a significantly lower credit score. This is probably the easiest way to tear up your credit, is missing payments when they're due. So you gotta make payments when they're due. And it's like common sense to say this, but I'm telling you, like, this is the biggest factor when coming up with your credit score. It's making payments when they're due. So how frequently are you making or missing payments? So consistent and on-time payments is the best way to improve your score. Even if you're just making the minimum payment per month on every balance, still that's going a long way in improving your score, because that's showing that you are actually committed to making that payment when y'all agreed on paying it, right?
So all that being said, rule number 1, pay your bills on time.
Yes.
So if, just for instance, if a landlord, like one of us, sees somebody that has an eviction, what does that mean? That means that they haven't been making, that one time in their life, they weren't making payments on their rent on time. Why should a landlord willingly just accept somebody who has been evicted before?
No, I'm not.
So let's look at it from the other side, because I know a lot of people who are renting, they're like, oh, I've been evicted, I deserve a second chance. Yes, I do agree people deserve second chances, but at the same time, it's going to be very hard for a landlord to willingly give to a stranger a second chance that they don't even know that they have. The only thing that they're able to gauge is that credit score right now. Yeah. We can build a relationship with you over time, but
now.
Yeah, but right now, what can we do in order to ensure us that you are going to make your payments on time to me, and I'm not going to just be another example of your past behavior. Yeah. So that's why, like, I go back to rule number 1: pay your bills on time to protect your credit and to keep it looking good.
Yeah, and we're telling you something most people already know, right? It's not like we're giving you any new advice here. But what we are telling you is how important it is. We're telling you now, this is the most important factor. There's a bunch of other factors that we're about to go through, but this is the most important factor. 35% of your score, that's more than a third, is made up of how often you're missing payments. If you have good payments, if you've made good payments, you're already like pretty much almost there. So that's the biggest factor, 35% payments history. So the next factor is credit utilization. So this is 30% of the score. So credit utilization is essentially just the percentage of the credit that you have available that you are actually using. So for example, if I have a credit card with a $1,000 credit limit and I have $200 on my balance, so I've charged $200 to the card, I'm using 20% of that credit. So that's 20% credit utilization. So now the creditors or the FICO, they see the borrowers who max out their cards as irresponsible. So they don't want to see anyone using 100% or of your credit. They really look, they say 30% is the recommended. They don't want to see any big balances carried on your card. So this utilization rate is essentially, this is for individual cards and for the total as a whole. So they look at it both. So individually, obviously it's different for each credit card, but on each level, it should be around 30% as a good rule of thumb. So, but just think of it from their lender's perspective. So if they're going to lend to someone and they're seeing someone that has maxed out their card as, 100% of their balance, they're looking at this person always needs credit. Like this person's always using credit. They don't ever have any money to pay it, to buy anything with cash. Like, dang, that's how they're looking at you. Like you're just using credit too much. They're saying like you rely on it too much for everything. So they don't like that. They want to see people that carry less than 30% of the balance on their card.
Now, even though I feel their perspective on that, I want to give a little bit of a different side of a different story on how I personally use my credit card. So when I first got my credit card, it's a Chase credit card and you get 1.5% cash back. I mentioned this on the last episode as well. Yeah. So because of that 1.5% cash back, my mindset is like, I'm going to spend this money regardless. So why not spend it from the credit card and just pay it right back off?
Yeah.
But now I will put a big caveat on this. Like I said last week, you have to know yourself and know that you won't overspend, because the way I'm using my credit card, I also want to give what my limit was at first. My limit was $1,600. Well, yeah, so $1,600 was my original limit, and I typically like to spend about $1,000 a month, so I can know that I'm going to be able to pay it all back off at the end of the month. So that being said, 1,000 over 1,600, I can't do that math real quick. So just to tell you what that utilization was. 1,000 divided by 1,600, I was using 62% of my credit card. That's a big red flag for the credit bureau, and that's going to drop your credit score. Yeah. So one way to get around this is right before your statement is due, pay it all off. So that's one thing I used to always do. So I didn't see that big utilization rate go up on in my credit history. Yeah. And that does give you a big dock. So you can still get the points back, the 1.5% cash back, and still not have a high utilization by paying it off. Yeah. But I also want to mention an alternative way of doing this, but I'll put this caveat again: know yourself, because a lot of people will misuse this and it's going to be very detrimental to them later. The other option is to up your credit limit. So you can call your bank that you're banking with. So for me, it'd be Chase. I call Chase Bank and ask them, hey, can I get an up in my credit limit? So they actually did this voluntarily. I didn't even ask them to do it. They just did it by themselves. They upped me from $1,600 to $4,600 based on my past performance with paying my card on time.
Yeah.
So I think that they also don't like me. The reason that they don't like me is because since I always pay off my card in full, they never get any interest on any of the money that I've spent. So I pay my card off in full. Since I don't leave any, since I never have a balance at the end of the month, they don't get to make any money in interest on the money that I've spent. So I think that's why they up me to try to tempt me, saying, okay, if we give him the $4,600, maybe he'll spend $3,000 in 1 month and won't be able to pay it all off. So that's why I say you got to know yourself. I still spend the same $1,000 that I was spending in the very beginning when I had $1,600. I don't up my spending because my credit limit increases. I only I spend what I know I can maintain and be able to
Yeah.
pay back off at the end of the month.
Yeah.
And that's the key thing to know. Go ahead.
Yeah, see, he's upping his credit limit, so he can now increase his or decrease his utilization. So now it's less of a ding on his credit. And another thing too on that, just going back to what you were saying earlier when you were talking about, paying your bill in full every month, your balance in full every month. So he's paying it before the thing is due. So the credit, you got to understand from the credit bureau's perspective, they're not literally sitting there waiting to go check your credit report every week. They're only doing it like, I swear they only do it like every 2 months or something like that. It don't come often, but like when they're coming to do it, if you pay it off before they check it, you can use 100% utilization. That's fine. But if you pay it off before they come and check it, then it's not going to be a ding on your credit. They're not going to say that that's a big deal because they didn't even see it.
And I do know, I know when they check it. So they Chase reports my statement to the credit bureau once my statement is done. So that's how I know when it's a good time to pay it. So for me, and for example, they report on the 17th. The statement ends on the 13th. So I pay it all off on the 12th. That way, when they send it to the credit bureau, it's good to go. Well, it's going to report a zero utilization rate.
Yeah, and each creditor is different. So each creditor is reporting it at a different time. So if you can figure out when they're reporting it, and that's a way around it. But I feel like that's too much work. Just
you can really call them and ask when they report it. That's what I did. So that's how I know it now.
Well, yeah, there you go then. So you could just do that, but that's 30% of your credit utilization. So with these two things we just talked about, so we just talked about payment history and we talked about credit utilization. Those two things alone are more than those are 2/3, 65%. So that makes up 65. Those two things, your payment history and your credit utilization, makes up 65% of your FICO score. So if you can do these two things right, like you're already at a good score. I promise you'll probably already be at a 700 if you can just do these things. Like just those two things alone, it's that simple. And just making payments on time and keeping your balances low. So that's essentially all that is to give you a good credit score. You can have what did I say was for good is 670 to 739. Oh yeah, you can easily be in there if you can just do those two things.
Do those two things.
Yeah. So the third component, and this is not nearly as heavy as it, but it's like, it doesn't weigh nearly as much as the other two. This is just the length of your credit history. So this is 15%. So this is essentially just how long has each account been open and how long since the most recent action in that account. So a lower credit history length lowers your score, right? It sounds probably counterintuitive, kind of for most people if this is new to you, but that's just how it goes. The longer history, you got to think of it always think of it from the lender's perspective to see why, and put yourself in their shoes to see why it is the way it was, because then you understand it. So if you are looking at someone with a lower credit history versus someone with a longer credit history, you're going to see the person with longer history as someone that you have more information and more to go off of to see that they are either a better or they're a worse user at credit. So it's kind of just a thing that's there to gauge like how long you've been using, or to see how much information there really is to go off of for the creditor to use, and just put yourself in their perspective. If I'm going to lend to someone, I want to probably lend to the person with more credit information, just to see like, oh, they've been paying this for, or they've been making payments for this amount of time, they've been using credit for this amount of time, I have this much information to go off of. And that's not to say like, oh, I would use them even if they have bad credit with a long history. No, I still want to see the good credit, but that's why it's only 15%. You just want the information. They just want the information to go off of. So the length that they use is the average of all your accounts that you have open. So for example, if you have a credit card that you've had for 2 years and you have a credit card that you've had for 1 year, they're gonna use that average of that as your length of your credit history. So that would be 1 year. So your credit history is only 1 year. So the longer it is, I think I can actually saw the ranges, but they want to see stuff like 10 years. That's what they say is good. Like they want you using that when you was 10 years old. I'm like, golly, let me at least freaking turn 21. Yeah, that's how they kind of look at it. So you can still have an excellent score if you have no missed payments and utilization rates, though. So remember, that was 2/3. You don't. If you have a short credit history, that's fine. You can still have a excellent score if you have no missed payments and low utilization. So just remember that. So, and another thing too, just about this is if you want to keep your credit history longer, it's not to close any old accounts unless you absolutely have to. So closing old accounts is going to shorten your credit history. Even if you're not using the account, it's better to just leave it sitting there just because it doesn't really do you any help to close it. I mean, once it's that old, it's not really even weighing anymore on your credit. So it's only really the new accounts that kind of weigh. And we'll talk about that later, but those old accounts don't really weigh much. So it doesn't really do you any benefit to close it. So you might as well just, leave it open.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I know, like he said before, the lenders don't want to lend to somebody with young credit versus somebody with okay credit, because at least they will be able to look at history and be like, okay, he may have had a rough start, but he's gotten a little bit better, so now he's okay with his credit. So he may have like a 600 credit score. Okay, we may be able to manage that versus somebody who might have a 700 credit score, but is only a month old. I use those numbers because that was exactly me. So as a recent high school or college graduate, I think we'll be able to relate to a lot of our audience with that. Most of y'all probably have little to no credit because y'all just got out into the real world. So like for me, for instance, when I first graduated graduated my undergrad, I got a credit card a month after. So I had only a month of credit before I wanted to go get pre-approved to buy this house that I'm living in now. When the lender checked my credit, he was like, "Man, you only have 1 month of credit. What am I gonna do with this?" So that's why I had to jump through a whole lot of hoops. And we're gonna still say that for later. I want y'all to keep on sticking around. We're talking about some good stuff here. So I'm gonna say the story for a little bit later, but we had to jump through a lot of hoops in order to really be able to get me that loan because my credit was so young. He said the underwriting that they do is like computer based, it's software based. So the software is going to report back to them that, hey, this dude isn't reliable to lend to because his credit is too young. They rather see somebody come in there with maybe 500, 600, but with 10 years of history versus somebody who's brand new with a good score, but young score.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's just the way it goes. The algorithm doesn't care about any of the extra stuff. The algorithm just looks at the data and the facts. So if they're saying, "Oh, he don't have no credit history," don't lend to him. He's not a. Well, that's the underwriting for that. Mm-hmm. But the algorithm kind of works the same way. They don't really kind of look at any of the external stuff that you are a new person that is just fresh out of school and you might be a good credit user. They don't know. It's just completely objective and it's quantitative data. So you got to just do what they do, how they say to do it. That's just the way it goes. Look, no way really around it. That's just how it is. But I know Marlon has something that he'll probably talk about at the end. So you stick around for that, and he'll tell you how he was able to get around that.
Yep.
So that was the third component, 15%. Like I said, 15% is your length of your credit history. So 35% was your payment history, 30% was credit utilization, and 15% is your length of credit history. So that was pretty much most of it. The rest of it is just, that was 90% of it or 80%
80.
Of it. So
yeah.
So now let's get into the last couple ones. So 10%, the next 10% of it is any recent inquiries on your credit for a new credit. So any inquiries that you make for new credit are going to be, that's making up 10% of your FICO score. So very, very little weight held here. So when I say inquiries, that's pretty much means like any inquiry to get new credit. So if I want to, get a new credit card, you have to apply for it. So that's going to be an inquiry. If you want to get a mortgage, you have to apply for that. That's an inquiry. If you want a car loan, you have to apply for that. That's an inquiry. So anything you apply for is inquiry. So the creditors look at that as when you have too many, they don't like that. So that kind of goes against your score. So they don't want to see that you're just always applying for new credit because again, from their perspective, it's like, why does this dude need so much credit? Like, dang, You ain't got no cash, like on debit. But yeah, that's kind of how they look at it. So within inquiries, there's two types of inquiries. So you have hard inquiries. So these are pretty much when any lender or creditor reviews your credit score. So if you apply for any credit card, you're gonna get a hard inquiry on there. So hard inquiries ding you more. So these stay on your accounts for 2 years. So anytime you apply for a credit card, they're gonna stay on your account for 2 years. You apply for a mortgage, it'll stay on your account for 2 years. If you apply for any, car loans, 2 years. That's just how it is. So that's hard inquiries. The other type of inquiries is soft inquiries. So soft inquiries are just when I've only come across it once, but people say it's whenever you check your own score or an employer or something like that checks your score, and it's just to kind of check it. It's just to review it. They're not really doing a detailed look. So like a credit card company or a mortgage company, when you're getting pre-approved, they're doing more detailed looks. But when you check your score or your employer checks it, it's just like to check it. And I think there's some sort of misconception about this, that whenever you check your score, it lowers your score. I've always heard people say that ever since I was like in high school. I've always heard people say that. And then, I don't know. I never, thought about it that much back then. But I think it depends on how you're checking it. Maybe if you're checking it through the credit bureau, they might consider that as actually a soft inquiry. But if you're actually going to Experian or Equifax or TransUnion and trying to get your credit report, that could be a soft inquiry. But if you have I know me personally, I use Credit Karma. Mm-hmm. So Credit Karma, I've been using that for a year and a half now, and I've been checking my score almost like I check it like twice a week for the last year and a half, and it's never dinged my score. So Credit Karma, you've heard the commercials, and I always thought it was a scam or whatever, but it's actually legit. Like, you get on there and you check your scores, you can check all the inquiries, you can check all your balances, you can check the length of your credit, you can check everything to see how your credit score is actually being comprised. So it's very, very good app. I would definitely recommend anyone that's just getting into like their credit or even anyone that has any sort of credit or wants to build credit, use Credit Karma to check it, and always just make sure that it's stuff is up to date. That's something that a lot of people say is to check your credit at least once a year. I think that when they say that, though, they're just saying actually go do a soft inquiry with the credit bureau to make sure there's no errors, because a lot of times I've heard that there can be errors on your credit report, and they're not going to catch them themselves. You have to catch them, and the only way you catch them is if you're looking for them. So I don't know. I just use Credit Karma though. So yeah, these inquiries, they lower your score for about a year, not for too much, and they don't really hold any much weight at all. So it's not that big a deal if you're have to make inquiries, but don't do them unless you absolutely have to. Just don't go apply for credit just to do it. Only do it if you actually need that credit or if you actually are gonna use that credit. So.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to comment on what you had said earlier about the more inquiries and like why do lenders not like to see a lot of inquiries at one time? So looking at it from their perspective on this again, one thing that they may think, if you're getting a lot of inquiries and you're not getting any accounts attached to those, they might be like, okay, is he getting declined, or is he or she getting declined for whatever loan they were applying for? Because when you get a credit ding, that means that you were trying to apply for a loan or you're trying to get pre-approved. And if you don't get any account that's attached to it, like say a credit card or a home mortgage, and you just go to get another ding from somebody else, they're going to look at that and be like, so what happened here? Did you not get approved? Did they catch something that I might be missing? They're gonna start questioning you in that regard. So that's why you don't want to have too many inquiries at one time, because at some point they might start questioning why you have so many. It's like, okay, what's going on? What's the underlying problem with here?
Okay, so that was 10%. So inquiries for credit is 10%. The last 10% that makes up your FICO score is your credit variety. So your credit, when I say credit variety, that is just pretty much indicative of that you can handle a variety of debt. So credit variety meaning you have debt spread out in different places. So you have credit in student loans, you might have credit in credit cards, you might have debt in mortgages, you have any type of debt, car loans, all that kind of stuff. So that's just to see that you are able to use credit in a bunch of different ways. So thinking of it from the lender's perspective again, see that we've been able to handle this kind of debt, this kind of debt, this kind of debt, and that kind of debt. And look, this is not really a big part of it at all. It's very, very small, just with the increase, 10%. It's not going to make much of a difference. So definitely don't go start applying for just different types of credit just to boost your score. That's going to be actually counterintuitive because now you're adding inquiries and now you're, just adding a bunch of credit. You might miss payments, adding all this kind of stuff. So it's counterintuitive to just go do that. So don't really hold too much weight in this at all. I wouldn't even worry about it, honestly, at all. Don't even, consider it whenever you're trying to improve your credit. Just worry about those top two things that we were talking about mainly.
Yeah, so it basically speaking, if you have any accounts that have already been open, and so it's like accounts that have been open and that you've had for a long time. That's why I just want to go back to your point earlier. It's important not to close those because you will lose that credit history as a result. So leave those accounts open and just don't use it, but you still have the history along with it. So that'll be tagged along to you. So that may be included in some of your variety. But that goes. Another point is just that having a lot of accounts, like you're saying, counterintuitive. Having a lot of accounts isn't going to make it better necessarily. It actually may be counterintuitive because you're taking that average. You're taking the average of how many of how long each credit has been open, really. So if you have a car loan, if you have a credit card, if you have a mortgage, and they're all 1 month old, your average is going to be 1 month. But say if you had one credit card for 10 years, and then you got all these new loans for a month, now your average credit history has dropped dramatically from 10 years to maybe, I don't know, 1 year, because you've added a whole bunch more different credit, trying to get more variety. That's why you shouldn't really think of this as so important. Don't think of variety as like a really important thing, because it could be very counterintuitive, like you said.
Mm-hmm. And just to, kind of wrap this up about the FICO makeup. These were the top, things that make up your credit score. So yeah, just to review it, you have 35% with your payment history, 30% with credit utilization, 15% your length of credit history, 10% is any recent inquiries for new credit, and 10% is your credit variety. Just to reiterate, just only worry about those big two, like the payment history and your credit utilization. Make on-time payments, continue to make on-time payments, even if you're making the minimums, and just keep your credit balances low. So that's essentially if you want good credit, that's all you honestly need to do to get good credit. Just do those two things, keep those two things in mind. So
in reality, having good credit is just a matter of having self-discipline. If you can control impulsive spending and make your current debt payments on time, then it's honestly not that hard to obtain good credit. Now, don't get me wrong, there are many cases where someone got screwed over because someone messed around on their credit. This is unfortunate because your credit score is the first impression you give lenders when you go to apply for things such as a car, a home, or a credit card. But even if you currently have bad credit, it's not impossible to overcome. Think of your credit like a job interview. Would you go to the interview dressed as like a stripper or in muddy clothes? No, because you want your first impression you leave on the employer to be a good one. This is the role your credit plays. Keep your credit dressed professionally, because at some point, the interview to get that new home is coming. Remember, you never get a second chance for a first impression. If your credit isn't the best, focus on the first two items we talked about, making on-time payments and keeping your utilization low. We're not saying don't go to the hospital if you have a broken bone, but please don't continuously finance things that you cannot afford. This relates back to delayed gratification. Most people will never be wealthy because they refuse to cut expenses to save and invest their money. Oftentimes, they spend money that's not theirs through credit cards they cannot even afford to pay off. Do yourself a favor and set a high standard for yourself and for the type of first impression you want people to have of you. At the end of the day, you'll be the one who will benefit the most from this.
Okay, so I want to transition a little bit now to how to really build your credit, like how to build it relatively quickly. So like we mentioned earlier, in order to have good credit or to build good credit, you have to use credit. So I want to give you a few tips, and I want to start off with the one I've been saving of how I was able to get my get it pre-approved for my loan. So when you get a loan, you have to have something they're going to give you, like we said earlier, they're going to do some background checks, look at your credit history. And mine was very young. But so I wanted to use my dad as a co-signer on the loan. His credit is very good. It's very long. Has a lot of history on it. So I went there to the lender and said, "Hey, can I have my dad as a co-signer?" He said, "Okay, we'll do the underwriting." When the underwriting came back, it still said that we don't trust me as the guy like to be on a co-signer. So my score was bringing him down so much. Even though his score is like in the 800s, he has a stellar credit. And mine was just so young that it still said that we don't trust loaning to them. So what my lender told me, and I'll tell this to everybody I know now. This is the biggest thing. This is the biggest way to increase your credit score instantly is to become a co-borrower or authorized user on my dad's credit card. Now, this is a huge caveat. The person that you're becoming a co-borrower with has to be responsible and have good credit themselves for it to drastically impact your credit in a positive way. So I'll just give a little bit implications behind this, because a lot of parents or a lot of guardians, whoever you may try to become a co-user with on their credit card, they have a lot of they'll have a lot of fear about what's that going to mean. So becoming a co-user basically gives the borrowers, so which in my case was me, the credit history of my dad. So I became a co-user on his credit card. His credit card was probably 10 years of history on it. So I instantly get 10 years of history on my credit without having to have owned that credit card for 10 years. So now a lot of people are going to think, well, if I'm a co-user, I'm also going to get the card along with it. No. I don't have to use his card in order to have the history. So when they sent the card in the mail for me to have as a co-user, I just cut the card up. You don't need the card. That mitigates all the risk from the person who's lending their credit to you, and that it has no risk to them. Their credit doesn't get dinged. They don't drop in credit because they're attaching you to theirs now. They have no risk involved. If you don't use their card, and if you don't use their card, they have no risk involved. Because at the end of the day, they keep their credit, they keep using their card like they have been, and you don't have to worry about it anymore. Well, you get all the benefits. So there's no risk, but there's a whole bunch of benefits in that. And so that's how I was able to increase my credit score to over 100 of what it used to be. And now I was able to apply for the loan, get the best rate, and now here we are today. And so all that being said, just by me knowing that now, I want to be able to do the same thing for my kids. As soon as they're born, I'm putting them as a co-user on my credit card. So when they're 18 years old, they're going to have 18 years of credit immediately. Yeah. And so I think that's something that can really change the game for a lot of people. I got to say one more time, you have to be responsible. If you do something like that to your kids, don't be somebody who's not going to pay their stuff on time and then tag that to your kids' credit as well. That's the absolute worst thing you could do to somebody.
There's people that really do that too. So it's real.
I can't say that enough. Be responsible if you're going to do something like that for your kids, or if you're going to try to borrow somebody else's credit, they have to be responsible themselves and know that they're going to maintain that responsibility, that level of responsibility.
Free game. So
for sure,
another thing, just to kind of give another tip to wrap this up. Another thing you could do to build credit, this is more for people that have either super low credit. Well, no, I think it's most suitable for people that are building credit. You could open up a secured card. So a secured card is essentially just a card that's designed for people with no credit history. So all you do is really just make a cash deposit, and you kind of get a credit limit that might be equal to that deposit, and then you just use that. So they're using that cash deposit as collateral. So if you spend it, if you make all your payments on time and you close the account, you're going to get the cash deposit back. It's just like a deposit at a apartment or something like that. You're going to get it back if you use it the way you should use it. So, but the only thing about it is you kind of get low credit limits. This is how I got my first credit card 2 years ago. I just did it was a Capital One secured card. I put $50 deposit and they gave me a $500 credit limit. I still use this card because I don't really use credit cards like that. So that's my only credit card that I really even ever use. And I don't really even use it often. So I could probably close it and get that $50 back, but it's not worth it. I like having the convenience of having that 500 available if I ever need to use it, but I don't really use credit cards like that. So that's really it. That's
Another one, like another way to boost your credit pretty well is to report bills that are normally not reported to the credit bureaus. So for instance, you probably have a phone bill, you might have utilities, or you might pay rent. If you look at your credit report, like on Credit Karma, like Alex mentioned earlier, you won't see any of those pop up. And that's because those companies are not reporting to the credit bureau that you're actually making these payments on time. So if you're making those payments on time, you want to have some background, or you want to be able to show for that. Like you want to have something that shows for your hard efforts of making your payments on time. So there's these different tools that you can use, like Experian Boost, Rental Karma, and Rent Track. Any one of those are like little tools that you can use to report to the credit bureaus your bills that you've been paying, the ones that are not showing up in Credit Karma, like a mortgage or a car loan or something. So that's just another thing that we've learned about. I haven't personally used it myself, but that's a very good tool in order to have more credit history as well.
Yeah. Another tip I'm gonna say is to use credit when you don't need it. So a big thing about that is, I mean, when you use it when you don't need it, you're kind of it's like preventative maintenance, sort of. So you're building it in case so that when you do need it, you'll have the ability to get it. Because if you try to get it when you need it and you've never done it, then you can't get it. So build it whenever you don't need it. So like right now, if you don't have any credit, if you're listening to this, you don't have any credit, and I would definitely recommend either getting a secure card or going and getting some sort of like student credit card, or even like a gas card or something, and just using it for gas, groceries, just little stuff here and there, just to build that credit. And because remember, the biggest thing about credit is your payment history. They don't care what card you're using. They're just saying, hey, are you paying on time? So get a credit card and just, put $100 a month on it or something and pay it every month. The stuff you're already paying, like your gas and groceries, and just pay it off every month, $100 or something like that, just to build it so that when you do need it, you'll have the ability to get it on a minute's notice.
Yep. I definitely have to just say one more time, be responsible. If you're going to do something like that, be sure you pay it off, because that can also be counterintuitive. If you open up a credit card and don't pay it, now you've added bad credit to your credit history. Think of it like that too. But last, I just want to say, be sure to monitor your credit history, or be sure to monitor your credit score. Use tools like Credit Karma to make sure you're not getting any random fraudulent activity on your account. So for instance, somebody may open up 3 credit cards on your account one day and go max them all out. Now your credit score has dropped 300 points from a 600 to a 300, and nobody's going to loan to you. But you can always stop that. If you report it to the bureau, like, hey, I didn't open up these credit cards, they'll take it back off. But you got to do it early. So that's why it's important to be checking consistently. That way you make sure nobody is tampering with your credit score. Yeah.
And one thing to know is, like, in your lifetime, you probably will get hit with some sort of fraud. It's going to happen to everyone. So it already happened to me, low key, 2 weeks ago. But, that wasn't really fraud. That was just a stolen credit card. But one thing you can do also is you can, call Experian and tell them that you want to set up like a fraud alert thing. And you just kind of, they'll give you some security questions to answer. And then you just, answer those questions. And anytime someone tries to apply for any new credit, they have to answer those questions. And they're going to call they're going to call you and tell you someone's applying for credit, and they're going to ask you to answer those questions. And if it's not you, then it's fraud. So that's just like a preventative kind of thing to do. And that's definitely something you're going to wish you did when it happens. You'll wish you had done it whenever you didn't need it. So it's kind of another preventative maintenance kind of thing. I know I need to go do. I'm talking like I've done it. I've done it myself. But I need to go do that too. So just go ahead and just set that up. So.
Yep. Same with me. I need to do it myself, because do stuff like that when you don't need it. So that way, when you do need it, it's already there and ready to take action on it. So
facts. So now we're going to wrap up the podcast like we do every week. We're going to do end it with a little Q&A. We got one question this week for Marlon. If you do have any questions you want us to answer, hit us up on Twitter at the Monopolizers, or hit us up on IG at Money Monopolizers. So Marlon, you want to take away the question?
Yep. So this person asked, what's the first step I should take when looking to buy a house? So I would first recommend go check out episode 4, Renting versus Owning, where we talked about the perks of buying a house, pros and cons of both buying and renting. We talked about who should be on your team, which is like the agent and lender. We go a lot more in depth into that. And we also talk about the money that you need in order to put as a down payment, the closing costs involved and stuff like that. And then I will also utilize this episode to first get your credit right. So when you go try to get a pre-approval for a loan, you'll have the credit that's necessary to get that approval. Facts. So other than that, that's all I really got for that. But I wish you the best of luck. And for anybody else who may have that question.
All right. Yeah. So that's it for this episode of the Money Monopolizers Podcast. New episodes will be released every Thursday and will be available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Just search Money Monopolizers wherever you listen to podcasts. We hope you learned something of value today. If you did, we appreciate if you rated us and left us a review on Apple Podcasts. Like I said, I say it every week. When you do leave those reviews, it kind of helps us get higher in the search rankings and the search query and kind of, be able to reach more people, which is what we're trying to do with this. So please go leave us a rating, review, anything on Apple Podcasts if you can. You can also find out more info about us on Twitter at The Monopolizers or on IG at Money Monopolizers. We post informative content on there that'll keep you engaged. So check that out and make sure to share them posts. But until then, we out of here.
You've been listening to the Money Monopolizers Podcast, helping you take control of your financial destiny. To learn more about how you can be in control of your money, visit moneymonopolizers.com. We'll catch you next time when Alex and Marlon share more personal finance and wealth creation tips with you. Now it's time to take action.